Welcome back to Law and Society in Taiwan. And the last topic we will discuss today is future outlook and global perspectives. We start with the demographic trends, and the word demographic refers to the population. So if we look at the population in Taiwan, there is a strong trend towards higher education. Nowadays, we have so many universities, therefore, it's quite easy to be admitted for the young students and to study. In particular, gender equality has created many more job opportunities for women, and also the values in society are changing. Instead of a former focus on family, nowadays people like to have more liberty, more freedom. And all this together means that young people tend to marry at a later age. Moreover, the salaries are in average rather low, whereas the housing prices are very high in Taiwan. And as a result, even when people decide to marry, they may often delay the childbearing. So this means the reproductive period for couples becomes shorter, and the final result is that the birth rates in Taiwan are declining quite dramatically. And we see here a statistics where the source is the National Development Council. And we see a clear downward trend. And in fact, Taiwan has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world. It's about one child per woman as of 2020. Here we have the international comparisons. In Africa, one woman has in average more than 4 children. In Asia, a woman has in average 2 children. In Americas, it's even less. And in Europe, it's only 1.5. But in Taiwan, it's only about one child per woman. So this is pretty much the lowest birth rate in the whole world. So the test question for you, what is striking about Taiwan's birth rate, especially if compared with other countries? On the other hand, if we look at the life expectancy of the population, we see that it is rising. So the health services are better, and so in average, people tend to become older, and this means that the population is aging. So we have more and more old people. Therefore, in 1993, Taiwan became a what we describe aging society. And this term means that about 7% of the population are 65 years or older. So here we see 1993, and we have about 7% of the population that is 65 years or older. The next category is called aged society, and it means when we have 14% of the population that is 65 years or older. And Taiwan became an aged society in 2018. So here we have 2018, and Taiwan reached the threshold of 14% of the population that is 65 years or older. And in fact, Taiwan is now moving towards a super aged society where 20% of the population are 65 years or older. In other words, one in every five persons is 65 years or older. And very soon, in 2025 or 2026, Taiwan will reach this kind of category to become a super aged society. So, the question for you, what is the difference between aging society, aged society, and super aged society? In which category does Taiwan fall? Next, let us take a look at the population pyramid and have a comparison. So, back in 1960, this was the normal population pyramid where we would have many children, and then we would have the adults, and we would have fewer seniors. However, 60 years later, so the current status about 2020 here, the population pyramid looks quite different. We see here we have fewer children, we have the working adults, and we also have more and more elderly people who are more than 60 or 65 years old. And in the future, by 2060, the population pyramid will most likely look like this, where we have very few children. We do have the working adults, but most important of all, we have many, many elderly people. And why do we care about this kind of population pyramid? Well, it's significant because only the working adults here, they are the ones who produce the services and who make the money and who pay the taxes. Whereas the children and the elderly, they are dependent on these working adults. So it's crucial, right, that we maintain enough working adults. And this might pose a problem in the future, as we can see here. Yeah, when we don't have enough children and we have many elderly people. What do you think are the reasons for Taiwan's demographic trends? And do you want to have children? And why or why not? So let's look at the consequences of the low birth rates. If the birth rates are declining and really extremely low, there will be a number of consequences, and this means we have to do something, right? So, first of all, what can we do to provide incentives so that more people will be willing to have children? And here we have a law that is called Act of Gender Equality in Employment, and we're going to talk about this law in a few minutes. But basically, here it is to make it easier for people to combine their work, so employment, with having a family. And in addition, of course, it is important to make childcare more affordable, for example, by providing various forms of subsidies and incentives. So the next problem is if we don't have enough children, what does this mean for the schools and for the education system? It means that we don't have enough students who can be admitted to the schools, and therefore, more and more schools will have to close or merge or restructure or otherwise transform. And this is a process that is already happening now. Yeah, many schools are actually closing. The next problem is when the children grow up, they work, but we don't have enough workforce because we just don't have enough young people. This, of course, is a very serious problem. Yeah, who is going to provide all the services? And here we have two important laws that have been enacted in Taiwan. One is called the Act for the Recruitment and Employment of Foreign Professionals. So you can see the goal here is to attract foreigners to come to Taiwan and provide services and work. And the other law is called Middle Aged and Elderly Employment Promotion Act. So this law wants to promote the middle-aged and elderly to stay working, to continue working instead of retiring. Now we know that those who work, who have income, they are the ones who pay the taxes. But if we have fewer people who are working, it also means that the tax revenues are going to decline in the future. And for the government, this means the government has to find alternative sources of funding. So the government cannot just rely on taxes anymore. And then eventually, when the people grow old, we have an aging society. And here it is important to take care of the elderly. And here we have a law that is called Long Term Care Service Act. And also, this is an important law that we will talk about in a few minutes. Taiwan here is also providing incentives for the local governments to provide an age-friendly environment, and for this purpose is, for instance, providing some awards, age-friendly city awards. And last but not least, when we have many old people, what does this mean for the health insurance system? It's a big burden for the health insurance system. And this means we will try that elderly people don't get sick in the first place. So this means preventive care, for example, by building sports centers so people remain active and won't get sick. And another innovation here are the mobile hospital vans. So here, instead of the elderly people having difficulties going to hospitals, it is possible that the vans provide these medical services and they drive directly to the communities where we have many elderly people. So here you can see a cascade of problems that will arise as a result of declining birth rates in Taiwan, but also the possible solutions, right? What can we do to resolve these problems? And we now take a look at the relevant laws here. The first one is, as I already mentioned, the Act of Gender Equality in Employment, which was enacted in 2002 and very recently revised in 2022. Article 11 of this law says that when employees get married or pregnant or have children, this should not be an excuse to terminate the employment relationship. And the termination of a labor contract would, in any event, be null and void, yeah, meaning invalid. According to Article 15, employers shall grant maternity leave. So, maternity leave means for the mother who will give birth or after childbirth. So, this can be granted before and or after childbirth and for a total of 8 weeks. Moreover, 7 days of leave can be taken, including the continued salary, so the regular wages for pregnancy checkups, but also for the husband who wants to accompany the expecting mother. And this is called paternity leaves. Yeah, so paternity means also the father can now take this kind of leave and continue to be paid. And this was recently included in the law. This kind of leave used to be paid only for 5 days, but as you can see, it has now been increased to 7 days, and the additional 2 days are subsidized by the government. The Ministry of Labor here is the competent authority at the central level, and the government here is willing to pay the additional 2 days. In addition to this kind of maternity leave and paternity leave, we also have parental leave. And parental leave means that both parents, so the father and also the mother, can take a leave according to Article 16, however, without pay until their children reach the age of 3, but this kind of leave cannot exceed 2 years. According to Article 19, as long as the children are younger than 3 years old, it's also possible to reduce the work hours for 1 hour per day. However, here also no compensation is paid. And employees can also ask for more flexible work hours, so to adapt their work hours so they can spend the time they need with their children at home. What are some other incentives that are granted by the government to encourage couples to have more children? For instance, rent subsidies is granted for newlyweds and child-rearing households, and the amount here has been increased quite significantly. We know that renting an apartment in Taiwan can be very, very expensive. So here we have some subsidies. Moreover, the government is building social housing. So they are constructing more apartments and then selling it for at lower prices for young couples. And also, fertility treatments are given to couples to make them more fertile. And also, here, the subsidies have increased very much. And also, the medical examinations, such as prenatal examinations or ultrasound examinations, are free, and the number here has been increased as well. So this is before the incentives before a child is born, and after a child is born. Here you see we have many more incentives, including monthly child rearing allowances for children under 5 years. So if you have a child under 5 years, then the government will just pay you every month, and the amount here has been increased. You can see from 2,500 Taiwan dollars to 3,500 Taiwan dollars, and now starting August 2022, it's 5,000 Taiwan dollars per month. Moreover, children until the age of 2 who attend public care centers or quasi public care centers will receive a monthly subsidy, and this amount has been increased recently up to 5,500 and 8,500 Taiwan dollars, respectively. The next problem is other tuition fees, right? So when we have children, they have to go to schools, and here the monthly tuition fees has been kept for public preschools, not more than 1,000 Taiwan dollars. For non-profit preschools, the tuition fee is not more than $2,000. For quasi-public preschools, the tuition fee is not more than $3,000. And children from middle or low-income households can go free. So here they don't have to pay tuition fee. Also, the places, the available spaces at the preschools and childcare facilities have been increased. So we see the number has almost been trebled recently. And I mentioned already that parents have the possibility to take a leave from their work, however, without pay. But now there is the possibility to receive a stipendium or a stipend or an amount of money for these kinds of parents. And as you can see here, there is a possibility to be insured, and this insurance has been increased. And the government here also is willing to pay a higher percentage of this kind of insurance. And last but not least, the tax burdens has been relieved for the parents, so they can get a special deduction for their preschool children, and the amount here is now 120,000 Taiwan dollars. The next law that I mentioned already is the Act for the Recruitment and Employment of Foreign Professionals. And this law was introduced in 2017 and last revised in 2021. And you can see a promotional video that explains this law here, published by the National Development Council, NDC. And you can find this video also on YouTube. And the purpose of this law is explained in Article 1 of this law, and it says that recruitment and employment of foreign professionals is a means of raising the national competitiveness. So we know that as a result of the declining birth rates, Taiwan is facing a lack of talents, of skilled workers. And therefore, in response to this problem, this law has been enacted. Article 4 defines the different categories of professionals that Taiwan wants to attract. And here we have foreign professionals, such as a foreign language teacher who comes to Taiwan to teach English, for example. And then we have the foreign special professionals. So these professionals have special expertise in certain areas and also have the special um, privilege to apply for a so-called employment gold card where they get four privileges in one. So they get the work permit, the resident visa, the alien resident certificate, and the re-entry permit, all in one application. And we also have the category of foreign senior professionals. So these are those professionals that have, for example, received top awards at prestigious international competitions. Another law was enacted in 2019 to attract the middle-aged and elderly to stay in the employment. So it's called Middle-Aged and Elderly Employment Promotion Act. Article 1 says this law wants to improve the utilization of human resources. Yeah, so we know this law is about human resources, and in the face of an aging population, we will face a labor shortage in the future, and therefore one solution is to promote the seniors and middle-aged persons to continue working. And we have the definition here in Article 3. Senior and middle-aged persons are those aged 45 to 65. And once you are reach the age of 65 or older, then you are a so-called elders. You're called elders. Very important, Article 12 prohibits a differential treatment or unfavorable treatment based on age. In other words, age discrimination is prohibited, in particular when it comes to the recruitment, the performance evaluation or the promotion, the education and training, the payment of wages, and the retirement. So, in all these stages, it is prohibited to discriminate solely because of one's age. Of course, there are certain exceptions that can be justified, but as a general principle, age discrimination would be prohibited. And here you see the consequences. You can be fined up to 1.5 million Taiwan dollars, and also the name of the responsible person can be published. And when there is a failure to make improvement, then there will be consecutive fines. And according to Article 32, the Central Competent Authority shall establish a database of retired talents. So here we have a central database where we can find the information, which persons are retired, what skills do they have, and all this can be helpful to to help them become re-employed after retirement. Now let's talk about the Long-Term Care Service Act from 2015 and last revised in 2021. If we take a look at this law, we get a picture how we can take care of the elderly. The traditional way was to put the elderly into an institution where they are taken care of 24 hours a day, also during the night, and including their residential services such as a nursing home. However, it's also possible to provide home services. So here we send service providers to the homes of the elderly to help them, for example, with some domestic chores. And a more modern trend now are the community based services, where the elderly, in principle, stay in their own homes, but during the day, they are transported to a community center where they have the possibility to socially interact with others, where they are taken care of, where they can eat, and where they are also provided temporary housing services. Another possibility are the family caregiver supportive services, meaning that in principle it's the family members themselves who take care of the elderly, but they also do need some kind of assistance, and this is provided to these family members. And there are the other manners of services that can be published by the competent authority, and the competent authority, uh, according to this law, is the Ministry of Health and Welfare as the central competent authority. Question: looking at the population pyramid as it is now and will be in the future, what problems do you see? And how can these problems be solved? Next question: what can the government do to help young people in Taiwan? What is your personal wish list? Now that we have talked about the demographic trends, let's turn to another very interesting development in Taiwan, namely the goal of becoming bilingual by the year 2030. The word "bi" means two, and it refers to the goal of promoting English. Because we know that when you speak English, it's like opening a door to the whole world. Everyone speaks English, and then we will be able to have more international connections and also increase our global competitiveness. More specifically, the goal is to foster domestic talents. This includes not only students, but also civil servants or government officers. The hope here is that all these people will be able to communicate in English as well. And speaking of global competitiveness, when it comes to multinational enterprises in attracting foreign investment, these enterprises will be more willing to come to Taiwan when we have the workforce that also is able to communicate in English. Now that we understand the background and the goal of becoming bilingual, the question is how we can achieve this goal. Here we have to note that the passive English skills in Taiwan, in average, is not so bad, yeah, such as reading or listening. However, what really needs to be improved are the active skills, such as writing and speaking. And a way to achieve this goal is, for example, at the universities, we try to teach more courses using English as a medium of instruction. This course, for example, is a typical EMI course where we use English as a medium of instruction in the hope that this will help our students to improve their English skills. Teaching in English, of course, is not enough. We also have to test and make sure that we have achieved our teaching goals. And then we have to continue the training and give the people many more possibilities to apply the English skills. And one very helpful resource here is provided by the National Development Council. a bilingual learning resource website with lots of news, videos, translation resources. So take a look at this homepage. And there is also a Facebook page about the bilingual 2030 policy with lots of resources and information. So the question now for you, what are the objectives of the bilingual 2030 policy? Are you personally motivated to learn English? Why or why not? What has been the biggest challenge for you when trying to learn English? Was it a lack of time, lack of resources, lack of a role model, or what was your biggest challenge? And on the other hand, what has been the biggest help for you when trying to learn English? For example, was it watching videos, reading books, going to cram school, or maybe traveling abroad? What is your opinion about EMI courses? Do you have any suggestions for improvement? And what else can schools and the government do to help young people become bilingual? Finally, we want to talk about the international relations because this is a very important topic also for Taiwan's future. And here we have the new southbound policy that has been promoted by the government since 2016. The background is what? In the past, we have been strongly relying on mainland China in doing business, etc., probably because we speak the same language. But we should not put all our eggs in one basket. Yeah, so it's important to diversify the risks and also our market strategies. So here we want to strengthen the regional cooperation with other partners in the south. And here you see the picture. We have Taiwan here, and actually there are many more possibilities in the south. For example, we can promote economy and trade, be it by way of investment, yeah, or in particular also giving more chances to our smaller and middle-sized enterprises. We want to exchange talents, be it students or interns, researchers or professionals. We can share our resources, for example, in the fields of healthcare by providing scholarships, by promoting education, training, and technology, and more generally connecting the regional tourism. Which countries now are included in the southbound policy? And here, let's take a look at the map. We have the six South Asian countries: India, Pakistan, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Australia, and New Zealand. Also included are the 10 ASEAN members. And ASEAN here means Association of Southeast Asian Nations, founded in 1967 by Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand, and later joined by Brunei, Laos, Myanmar, and Cambodia. Next, let's talk about Taiwan's relationship with intergovernmental organizations. Currently, Taiwan has full membership in 40 intergovernmental organizations. And here I only list the most important ones, namely the Asian Development Bank, the ADB, established in 1966 and now headquartered in the Philippines. The ADB focuses on the Asian region where it wants to promote social and economic development. And very interesting to note that Taiwan here is a founding member. However, the name was later changed to Taipei, China. A very important forum is the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, established in 1989 with the headquarters now in Singapore. The goal is to liberalize trade and investment, and Taiwan here has been a member since 1991 under the name of Chinese Taipei. Since 2002, Taiwan is a member in the WTO, the World Trade Organization, established in 1995, located in Geneva, Switzerland. And the goal of the WTO is to promote multilateral free trade. Taiwan here is a member under the name Separate Customs Territory of Taiwan, Penghu, Jinmen, and Mazu, or Chinese Taipei. Moreover, Taiwan also participates and cooperates with other intergovernmental organizations, such as the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, located in Washington, D.C. As the name indicates, this is also a regional financial institution that seeks to promote long term projects in Latin America and the Caribbean. Taiwan here is an observer since 1991 and cooperates with the IDB under the name or through the ICDF, the International Cooperation and Development Fund. The OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is a forum that was established in 1961 and is headquartered in Paris, in France, and is important because it seeks to improve the public policies and it drafts the international standards. Taiwan now used to be an observer, but is now called a participant in various committees of the OECD under the name Chinese Taipei, notably in the committees for competition, for steel, and fisheries. The EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development Bank, was created in 1991 and is located in London. If you think of 1991, what happened? It was the end of the Cold War, the fall of the Soviet Union, the fall of communism. And so the goal of the EBRD is to help these former communist countries to transition towards open and sustainable market economies. Despite its name, European, the goal here is to help not only the European countries but also other countries. For example, in Asia, and Taiwan here has been a donor or investor since 1991 using the name Taipei, China. Of course, Taiwan is hoping to participate in many more intergovernmental organizations, such as the International Civil Aviation Organization, the ICAO, located in Canada, or the World Health Organization, the WHO, headquartered in Switzerland, and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, located now in Germany. These organizations are UN organizations or agencies. And for this reason, Taiwan currently is not a member, but yeah, the participation, at least, is being supported by the United States, for example, and also by the European Union. And here I want to talk about a practical case to let you understand why it matters for Taiwan, but also for other countries that Taiwan here is able to participate. So the case happened during the coronavirus epidemic when China had many, many cases, more than 17,000. And for this reason, many international airlines restricted their flights or even suspended their flights to and from China. There were no restrictions at that time, for example, for Japan, for Thailand, for Singapore, and South Korea, because there were only few cases there. Taiwan at that time had even fewer cases. Nevertheless, Italy and Vietnam banned the flights to and from Taiwan. Why? Because the WHO and the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, classified Taiwan as part of China. Now we know that Vietnam is a very important destination for Taiwan with many flights per week leaving and departing from Taiwan. And so also the EVA Airways took off for Vietnam one day, but was forced to turn around mid-air when it was declared that now the flights from Taiwan to Vietnam are prohibited. However, the story had a happy ending. So, in the end, both countries, Vietnam and also Italy, lifted the bans after the Taiwanese government persuaded and explained to them that mainland China and Taiwan have separate systems for disease control and air traffic management. So I think this practical case helps us to understand why it's really of practical importance that Taiwan has the possibility for meaningful participation in these international organizations. Next, we look at the relations between Taiwan with the United States. Officially, the United States has no diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Nevertheless, Taiwan is a key partner for the United States. And in fact, the commercial and economic ties are deep and growing. For example, when it comes to trade, to investment, and financial matters. Taiwan here is a critical supply chain provider, for example, when it comes to semiconductors. And in fact, Taiwan is the eighth largest trading partner of the United States. And on the other hand, the United States is Taiwan's second largest trading partner. Also, we have strong people to people ties because of education, because of health cooperation, science cooperation, technology cooperation. And Taiwan became a member of the US visa waiver program in 2012, which means that Taiwanese passport holders can travel to the United States without a visa if the purpose is for tourism or business purposes, and they can stay for not more than 90 days. The strong relationship here is founded on similar values such as democracy. Now, if we specifically look at the relationship in terms of China, so of course, China here is the main reason why the United States has no official ties with Taiwan, because the United States acknowledges the One China policy. The One China policy here is interpreted differently by China itself, mainland China, and also the US. So the US here says we acknowledge, but it does not mean that the US agrees with China's interpretation of the One China policy, which says that Taiwan is part of China. So there is a kind of strategic ambiguity, right? That the United States acknowledges, but they don't expressly explain or agree what their interpretation is with regard to Taiwan. And the United States One China policy is guided by the Taiwan Relations Act of 1979, the three joint communiques from 1972, 1979, and 1982, and the six assurances that were given by the United States in 1982. So let's take a closer look at these important laws and policies. Back in 1972, the first communique or communication or official press release was published between the United States and the People's Republic of China when President Nixon visited China, Shanghai, and on this occasion released the first joint communique. So this was the start of the normalization of relationships between the United States and mainland China. And here the United States acknowledges that all Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintain there is one China and Taiwan is part of China. The US does not challenge that position. But note the word acknowledge. So acknowledge does not necessarily mean that the United States agrees with this kind of interpretation. The United States also declares its interest in a peaceful settlement of Taiwan, of the Taiwan question by the Chinese themselves. And with this prospect in mind, has the ultimate objective to withdraw all US forces and military installations from Taiwan as tensions in the area diminishes. The second communique was published in 1979 between the People's Republic of China and the United States. And this was under the United States President Carter. And this communique is important because it officially established the diplomatic relationships between the United States and the People's Republic of China. So here, PRC and the United States recognize each other. They established diplomatic relations as of January 1st, 1979, and the United States now officially recognizes the PRC as the sole legal government of China. However, at the same time, the United States will maintain cultural, commercial, and other unofficial relations with the people of Taiwan. And the government, the US government here acknowledges that the Chinese position, that there is one China and Taiwan is part of China, but again, acknowledge does not necessarily mean that the US government agrees with this kind of position. That same year, in 1979, US Congress passed a law called Taiwan Relations Act, TRA. And this law has been called the cornerstone of relations between the United States and Taiwan. So, Section 2 of this law states that the president has terminated governmental relations between the United States and the governing authorities on Taiwan. But at the same time, this law also stresses that the United States wants to preserve and promote commercial, cultural, and other relations with Taiwan. And this law also emphasizes that peace and stability in this area across the Taiwan Strait are of political, security, and economic interests of the United States and even a matter of international concern. This is very notable because China insists that the Taiwan question is a purely internal matter. But we see here that the law in the United States clarifies that this is a great of great interest to the United States and also for the international community. Moreover, this law emphasizes that diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China rests upon the expectation that the future of Taiwan will be determined by peaceful means, and that any efforts to determine the future of Taiwan by other than peaceful means, including by boycotts or embargoes, are a threat to the peace and security of Western Pacific area and thus a grave concern to the United States. So here the United States makes clear that any cross-strait differences between the mainland China and Taiwan must be resolved by peaceful means. And in other words, that the current status quo, the situation at that time, must be preserved and cannot be changed by any side using force. And for this purpose, the United States here commits itself to provide Taiwan with arms of defensive character and to maintain the capacity of the United States to resist any coercion that would jeopardize the security or the social or economic system of Taiwan. So, this is a security commitment here made by the United States, even though they do not expressly guarantee a military intervention. But the United States here clearly promises to provide Taiwan with all the defense articles and services that it needs to defend itself. Section 4 of the Taiwan Relations Act furthermore states that the absence of diplomatic relations shall not affect the US laws with respect to Taiwan, and that the existing laws with regard to Taiwan shall continue to apply in the manner prior to 1979. So this means the existing laws, and this also includes the international agreements concerning Taiwan, shall continue to be applicable. Whenever US laws refer to foreign countries, nations, or states, this shall also include Taiwan. In other words, the de facto relationship with Taiwan shall be maintained. And nothing in this act may be construed or interpreted as a basis for excluding Taiwan from continued membership in any international organization. And indeed, the United States continues to support Taiwan's membership in international organizations where statehood is not required. And where such membership is not possible, then at least Taiwan shall be able to participate, to have a meaningful participation in these international organizations. Section 6 of the Taiwan Relations Act establishes the American Institute in Taiwan, the AIT, as a nonprofit corporation. And in Section 7, stipulates that this AIT may assist and protect the interests of United States persons by performing acts for consular purposes. So even though the American Institute in Taiwan is established as an NGO, a non-governmental organization, de facto it serves and performs the functions of an embassy. A few years later, in 1982, and this is now under US President Reagan, the United States provided six assurances to Taiwan. First, stipulating or clarifying that the United States has not committed itself to set a date for ending the arms sales to Taiwan. Second, it has not committed itself to consult the People's Republic of China on US arms sales to Taiwan. Number three, the United States here clarifies that it does not see itself in a position to play a mediation role between Taiwan and mainland China. Number four, the United States does not intend to revise the Taiwan Relations Act. Number five, the United States has not changed its position on Taiwan's sovereignty. And number six, the United States has not and will not pressure Taiwan to negotiate with the People's Republic of China. So, why were these six assurances given? Well, because on the same day, August 17th, 1982, the United States published the third joint communique between the People's Republic of China and the United States. And this third joint communique concerns the US arms sales to Taiwan. And here it becomes clear that there is no agreement between the United States and mainland China on this difficult question. And furthermore, the US says it has no intention of interfering in China's internal affairs or pursuing a policy of two Chinas or one China and one Taiwan, meaning that the US does not support Taiwan independence. So, as I just mentioned, the United States also thinks it's best to preserve the status quo. And then finally, this joint communique states that the US government does not seek a long term policy of arms sales to Taiwan and intends to gradually reduce the sale of arms, and that two governments will make every effort to settle this issue. So the long term goal is to not sell the arms anymore. But of course, this is conditioned on the expectation that there really is a peaceful resolution. Most recently, the US Congress has passed several more laws to promote relationships between the United States and Taiwan. For example, in 2018, the Taiwan Travel Act encourages visits between officials from the United States and Taiwan at all levels, including at high levels. And in 2020, the Taipei Act was passed by US Congress, the Taiwan Allies International Protection and Enhancement Initiative Act, which expresses support for diplomatic alliances around the world and Taiwan's participation in international organizations. So we see that the US Congress is a very strong promoter of good relationships between the United States and Taiwan. With this, let us finally take a look at relations between Taiwan and the European Union. So also the European Union has no diplomatic relations with Taiwan. However, 15 of the 27 EU member states do have offices in Taipei, and soon it will be one more, namely Lithuania will soon open also an office in Taipei. Moreover, the EETO, the European Economic and Trade Office, represents the European Commission in Taiwan. So we know the European Commission is a very important institution in the EU. It's a kind of executive, yeah. So they execute the laws. They are a kind of watchdog, and they also have an office in Taiwan. Another important institution in Taiwan is the European Chamber of Commerce of Taiwan, the ECCT, and they represent the business interests, the interests of the European businesses and companies in Taiwan. So we see that also the EU and Taiwan have very close economic ties. In fact, Taiwan is the number 14 trading partner of the EU, and the EU is the number 4 trading partner in Taiwan, and even the number 1 foreign investor in Taiwan. So we know the EU is composed of 27 member states. Many of them have invested in Taiwan. More than 25% of all the investments in Taiwan come from Europe, and thus the EU is the top foreign investor in Taiwan. Another fact that shows that Taiwan has a good relationship with the EU is the visa exemption for Taiwanese passport holders who may travel to the Schengen area for short stays up to 90 days. Yeah, and this kind of visa exemption for Taiwanese passport holders exists since 2011. Moreover, Taiwan and the EU face similar challenges when it comes to climate change, for example, or health issues, aging society, security issues. And Taiwan and the EU also have shared interests in the fields of culture and education, research and innovation, or when it comes to sustainable growth. And last but not least, the EU and Taiwan have common values. So we know the EU is not only an economic union, but they are also a union of values. And the most important values for the EU are democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And Taiwan shares all these fundamental values, just like the EU. So, what about the role of China now? The role of China. So, also the EU has the official position of the One China policy, meaning that they recognize the People's Republic of China as the sole China. However, the EU also supports the status quo, so the situation that exists between mainland China and Taiwan, and therefore rejects the use or the threat of force against Taiwan, and encourages both sides to engage in dialogue and constructive engagement and to seek a peaceful resolution of differences across the Taiwan Strait. So, also, the EU makes it very clear they have a strong interest in peace, security, and stability in Asia, including the Taiwan Strait. Also, the EU encourages and advocates Taiwan's meaningful participation in multilateral fora, especially where Taiwan's participation is important to EU and global interests. And above all, the European Parliament is a staunch promoter of Taiwan. And to evidence this, last year, in fall 2021, the European Parliament, for the first time, issued a report or a recommendation specifically on EU Taiwan political relations and cooperation. And in this recommendation, the European Parliament states that Taiwan is a key partner and democratic ally in the Indo Pacific and recommends that the EU should intensify its relations with Taiwan, including looking into the possibility of signing a bilateral investment agreement, and also encourages the EU and the member states to be more proactive and to establish partnerships with the democratic government of Taiwan. So now that we have an overview of the international relations between Taiwan and the international community, let me ask you some questions about your own future and how you would like to see the future of Taiwan. So, what is your hope for Taiwan's future? And what can you do to achieve that vision? What is your top advice for Taiwan? And how can you help improve Taiwan's law and society? This brings us to the conclusion. Taiwan's development has been described as a miracle. Looking ahead, it can indeed build on outstanding achievements thanks to its diverse and resilient society, a vibrant economy, and innovative technologies. Some of the greatest challenges yet to be resolved are of political nature, notably increasing military actions from mainland China. Considering Taiwan's geostrategic importance in the Indo Pacific region and its key role as a supplier of vital components, for example, semiconductors, the need to maintain peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait is attracting worldwide attention. Seen from this perspective, the future of Taiwan is not predetermined by fate, but dependent on multiple factors, for example, multilateral support and the will of its people. The ultimate question is whether and how liberal, open, and democratic societies can prevail in the face of mounting pressure from autocratic regimes that seek to impose their power through various tactics. And here we have many references. Many more references for your self-study. We also have some videos. And finally, the laws that I cited in this presentation. This concludes my course, Law and Society in Taiwan. I hope it was an interesting adventure to learn more about this unique nation. Let us cherish and do all we can to protect this beautiful island.